Okay, welcome to another session of the Goa Arts and Literary Festival, the second day of a very rich set of discussions. As you know, one of the things we do again and again is assess where we are and look at new trends that are taking place in different aspects of arts and literature and also publishing. And today we're going to look at journalism in 2015 and the question of philanthropy. Increasingly, journalism is under pressure, daily journalism, print journalism particularly, but including on the internet. Journalism's life's earnings are under pressure, journalists' earnings are under pressure all over the world. One model that's emerging is a number of publications are getting funding from foundations and from non-profits, and that's something that seems to be gaining traction in India. And it's a topic that is of great interest to all of us, and we couldn't have a better panel to discuss it. Today with us we have Samar Halarnkar, who at this point does not need a major introduction from me, but Samar is with India's Pen and also is the author of several books, including recently a book on the married man's guide to cooking. Also we have Naresh Fernandes, who is the author of several books, a wonderful book on Bombay, Taj Mahal Foxtrot, which is on the history of jazz in India. Both of these books are available outside. He also runs Scroll.in, which is one of the great developments, I think, in English language journalism anywhere, but certainly in India it's been an extremely significant force in the course since emerging not so very long ago. And we also have welcome Dhimant for his first appearance at the Goa Arts and Literary Festival. The other two are veterans. Dhimant is the co-founder of The Better India, an alternative news and publishing platform that serves inspiring stories from across India. Welcome, and over to you, Samar.
This is good. I want to just begin with a statistic. The Registrar General of Newspapers in India, which registers every publication that exists in India, this year for the first time crossed 100,000. This is a growth of 7% over last year, when it was, I think, 96,000 or something. So this sounds really good. We have more than 100,000 publications in this country, and in an age when print publications are dying across the world, India appears to be flourishing. And indeed, there have been a lot of articles written across the world about how the Indian print media are flourishing. But this is all entirely misleading, because the print media in India have always been actually under financial pressure. The economic downtrend that's began a couple of years ago has specifically pushed the print media to the wall. Let me tell you another statistic. It costs, when I worked with the newspaper, and that was about 5 or 6 years ago with the Hindustan Times in Delhi, the production cost of the paper was then about 8 rupees per paper, and it was being sold for 1 or 2 rupees a paper. I think the production cost is now up to about 10 rupees a paper. So essentially, you're getting a very subsidized newspapers. If you go to Pakistan and Sri Lanka, there are papers that cost 15, 20 rupees. So that tells you exactly what's happening. This model works, advertising works, as long as there is enough advertising. The moment that pie shrinks, you have a problem, and that has happened in India. In the television channels, there are about more than 100 television channels, news channels, of which less than 10 make any kind of money. The rest of them simply run into losses. Any number are run by mining barons and all kinds of dubious characters whose agenda could not less be the public interest. There is a clear crisis in Indian journalism. The crisis of the news media as far as the business model goes is something that is now being addressed by the evolution of publications like The Scroll and The Better India. And many of them now address specific audiences and have very specific ways of running their businesses. Let me begin by telling you about Dhimant Parekh's Better India, which has a large following among people. What they do is they stick to positive stories about India, things that have changed, things that can have an influence. The essentially good news about India. And they follow largely, as far as I know, and he'll tell you, a model that's based on philanthropy. And that's a model many of us are following. I work for India Spend, which is a data-driven public interest journalism non-profit. We also depend on donations from people. Naresh, who runs Scroll, does not depend on donations. I'd like to begin by asking Naresh how in this brave new world of the media he's managing to do without donations.
So I have to, we live our lives in paradoxes, and I have always been deeply suspicious of the market when it comes to the public interest. I think that we need public goods, and the public sector is a damn good thing. But when it comes to journalism, paradoxically, I find myself a great votary of the discipline and the compulsions that the market imposes on you. And I often, and this is an imperfect analogy, look at documentary film, which in India is often a dreary, boring thing. It does very high-minded, it sort of delivers high-minded subjects, but documentary film in India has been prepaid for. It is paid for by foundations who say, this is what we want you to do in your documentary film. Make a documentary film about mining, make a documentary film about the environment, make it about women's issues. And I think then it just allows the maker of the film to make a sort of product without any view to the audience that's going to look at the film. And I think journalism is an entirely different thing. Journalism requires you to do work in the public interest, but you have to realize that the public is interested in a great many things. This, in the age of the internet, is brought home to us with horrifying detail every day, because on my phone I have something called Google Analytics, which lets me see what people are reading, how many people are reading our stories at what time. And it's clear that despite all the high-minded protestations of our readers, they're interested in three things: astrology, Bollywood, and cricket. And every time you put on a story, we don't do astrology, we do Bollywood and cricket in what we think is an intelligent way. But those stories always immediately spike. And we spend a lot of money doing rigorous reporting from the Northeast, in Chhattisgarh, on the National Employment Guarantee Scheme. If you were to look at our trending bar, it's always stories about Twitter jokes about Samar Khan's acquittal. So it's clear that people are reading a lot of different things. The foundation money often comes with a very specific sort of mandate, and that is to do high-minded things. So when we were starting Scroll, we considered this model, and we went to talk to the people who do this very well in America, ProPublica, which is a public trust, and they advise us strongly against this. They say that they do very good investigative stories and that nobody reads them. They've had so few readers that essentially they've ended up spending $1 million on a story, and they've often had less than 20,000 readers per story. So that convinced us that we needed to try to find a new way. As you point out, the existing model is broken. Just before we started, Open Magazine had started. Open Magazine loses 8 crores a year. So we decided, nobody's winning here. Let's lose the 8 crores doing journalism. Much of that 8 crores is spent on production, on the paper, on the printing, on the distribution. The internet allows you to get away from those compulsions. Let's try to invent a new model here. It's an experiment, but we'd rather, and we spend nowhere near 8 crores a year anyway, but we'd rather spend the money doing journalism and figuring out how it's going to pay for itself than wasting it on print.
So where does your funding come from?
Aha!
They're not letting you get away with all this.
So we have some venture capital, and venture capitalists, as you know, want to be paid back. So our model is a combination of advertising, it's a combination of syndication, and it's a combination of technology sales. So I think in the new world, we will all be the slice of the pie, where in the old model you had only advertising. Now you will have to try a few more things, and you'll get less money from each section.
So are you in a sense following in the footsteps of the food aggregators and things like that, where they try a whole lot of things and figure out what happens? And I take it that you still have to figure out what works.
What do you mean by food aggregators?
I mean, there are a lot of food aggregators across India, you know, those who say that we will pick up food from so many restaurants and deliver it to you. Many of them go under. Many of them are get funded simply because there's so much venture capital money out there. So I'm assuming that you have also got a lot of venture capital money, some of the same venture capitalists. As you say, they want to be paid back.
Right.
How are you going to pay them back?
Because we already have sources of revenue, like I said, from syndication, from advertising. We think we're going to break even on operational costs probably by the end of this year.
And Scroll does that. That's good news for everyone, because that proves that there's a model that's working. Dhimant, do you want to talk about the Better India and your model?
Yeah. So, I'll just run you through how we're structured. So we're slightly different from how Scroll is structured and even India Spend, in the sense that the word philanthropy applies to us from the contributors' perspective, from the people who send us content. And I'll just get to that about how we reached there. The Better India was basically a need that arose between my wife and I. She's right here and is now the editor. We're two engineers, by the way, no media background. But here's how we started. We started saying that, hey, mainstream media, when you're flipping newspapers in the mornings, it really does nothing to you. You don't take back anything at all, other than probably Bollywood and cricket, which you just mentioned. So the idea was that, can news be used to drive change? Can news be distributed in a way that it can enable you to do something? So both of us just started working on, weekends as a side project, covering stories in Bangalore, that's where we're based, talking about unsung heroes, putting them up on a blog, and just letting the word out amongst friends of friends, and so on. The word spread. Someone in Delhi, in fact, incidentally, a reporter with Hindustan Times, got in touch and said, I have tons of such stories, and my paper's not going to carry them. Would you like to carry them? I'm like, yeah, sure. Right? And we added a new perspective. We got a new city being covered, and so on. And then someone who's doing wildlife conservation in Maharashtra, he said, I've got great stories to talk about. Writing was not his primary profession, but he wanted these stories to be told because there's so much impact happening. So he started writing for us. Someone in rainwater management has brilliant ideas, and he says these need to travel. Would your platform take it? It's like, yeah, sure. And slowly we realized we had to, of course, build a very strong core editorial team, which would do the vetting, which would do background checks and all of that. And slowly we grew to a network of almost today, we're about 500 contributors across the country reporting stories of change from different corners. Like right from Kanyakumari to Kashmir, we've got someone in the Northeast, someone in Rajasthan, like pretty much everything, and spanning the spectrum of things, which is right from arts and culture, grassroots innovations, in fact, a whole lot of grassroots innovations that we talk about, unsung heroes, and so on. So, and a whole bunch of these people are writing because of the passion of spreading these ideas. And what started happening as a byproduct of our platform is that we started catalyzing large-scale impact on the ground. So one NGO wanted to raise 1,000 solar lamps for children in Orissa, in a district there, which is cut off the national grid. They were trying for 6 months, and they raised 200 solar lamps. We ran the story, and in 3 days, we had 1,000 solar lamps. And that was impact, right? Which we now fall under the gamut of impact journalism. But, what we're really trying to do is news that is relevant, bring it out there, and you will see, people really taking on to it and bringing about a change. So there's a whole cascading impact happening. So that's how we're structured. In terms of funding our operations, we were really lean right from the beginning. There was a team of 3 who catered to a readership of 1 million people monthly, and then we managed to raise some amount of angel round of funding, which helps us experiment a lot more. We're trying to do more videos, we're trying to do more visual stories, and that is now, so now we're a team of about 6 people, and continuing to cater to almost about 2 million people every month right now. So I think the internet makes it a lot easier for you to scale something like publishing, something like internet journalism. Yes, initially it was a very the media was controlled by a few strong powerhouses, but then the market also was small. The fact that the internet penetrates everywhere, it basically just broadens the pie. And yes, you will have a lot more publishers, you will have a lot of good, a lot of bad, but I think it's important for the ecosystem, because what essentially you're doing is that not everyone is coming up with the same pie. For instance, the audience who's reading us, they abuse us when we put out a Bollywood story. They say, this is not what I like your page for. And we experimented with it because we've read enough that Bollywood is going to give you the numbers. So whenever you want to try and see if you can get more readership, you try and experiment. Just didn't work with us. The thing that people really love reading on our page is all about Indian Railways. Whenever Indian Railways does something, I don't know why, but whenever Indian Railways does something fantastic, it's like right up there and it's like trending for like a week on our site. So the point is there's a whole spectrum of interests that people read. So it's a fantastic world we live in, where you can go after the interest that you're very passionate about and cater to that audience and like really do a wonderful job of it.
I think unlike the Scroll and the Better India, there is very little that is good news on our side. I think we inevitably look at the dark side of India and we record data and tell you about how many that we have the world's largest number of child brides, largest number of illiterate people, the largest number of people without water supply, etc., etc. And our own donors have told us, but surely there must be something that is good about India that you can get from the data. And so we have tried to do that. But the point is that for the kind of things we do, we have not even thought of getting the kind of funding that they have. So we subsist on donor money. There's been an interesting development of late. There's been a new foundation has been set up in which I was involved, called the Independent and Public Spirited Media Foundation. It has now taken contributions from a lot of well-known people. It is a brainchild of Mr. Azim Premji of Wipro, it now has about 15 contributors from across India, people who are largely known not to have tainted money, mining interests and things like that, and has now gathered about 128 crore and will now distribute that money to to journalism outfits that are focused on the public interest. So there is, I think we're on the cusp of great change, and I think the jury is still out there as to what works and what does not work. But as far as philanthropy goes, clearly I think a time has come where philanthropy will play a major role in Indian journalism. Dhimant, would you want to tell us a bit about how people react when you go to them to ask for money for journalism? Let me just before that quickly tell you that when we were setting up the IPS, the new media foundation, one of our donors said, okay, let me get this straight. You're going to ask people for donations for something as vague as public interest journalism. Their name isn't going to go up on a building which says that so-and-so building for for medicine, etc. And then you're going to say you're going to lose control of all this money, and this money might come back and bite me in the ass. And he says, this is going to be a model for gathering money, good luck. But it did work. There were enough people who said that we'll contribute money and let go of it. Do you find that there's a greater appetite for donation?
Yeah, I think the perception has drastically changed from in the past 2 years. So 2 years ago when we reached out to people and said, hey, this is what we're doing and would you be interested in funding it? People were like, media is a dying business. Build something which is technology driven, build a technology platform for bloggers perhaps, but don't get into publishing, right? It's a dying business. So we said okay, and we just persisted with what we were doing because we were a very lean team. The costs were not so high. But a year long later, when a lot of investment started happening in the West, especially in the Silicon Valley, you had TechCrunch raising a lot of money, you had Huffington Post raising a lot of money and selling out for a lot more money. Suddenly, I think the venture capital funds in India started getting quite excited that there seems to be a business model, and considering that India is on the trajectory of people consuming content digitally, there could be a play. So now people do seem a lot more open, but yes, there are always still questions about how you're going to make money, how you're going to scale the numbers, all of that stuff. But I definitely see that people are just opening up, and I think There are funds, special funds being set up now in India, which primarily focus on media. So I think that's a great thing.
Naresh, what do you think is going to happen as we go ahead? Do you see more funds coming in through philanthropy, or do you think your model is going to prevail?
I think they will both coexist actually, and I don't think the models are exclusive. So we are going to approach the Premji Foundation to ask for money for specific things. We want to run a big project on public health. We want to run another big investigation on the state of education. And so we will seek funds to run those specific, those are the very cash-intensive sort of projects to run. And so I think they'll both coexist.
I think the good news is that these kind of projects, the type you mentioned in fact just now, there was very little appetite for that, and at least two of us have been involved in the mainstream print media. There was very little appetite for the regular media to run projects like that, which is why I think a lot of very important issues in India, whether relating to health, education, and a lot of things that matter, really don't make it to the front pages or into public consciousness. So could you expand a bit about how your experience was in your older jobs in the print media, and how you find that changing?
So actually, I would disagree with you that there's no appetite for this. There is a perception from people who run publications that readers are not interested in this stuff. But since we started Scroll, we put a lot of money into very intensive investigations. We have one reporter who's studying rural change. He's going to spend a year spending 2 months in 5 different states. We call that series Ear to the Ground. We have another couple of reporters very focused on development, Supriya Sharma and Anumeha Yadav, who go off and write about what the new identity card scheme, the biometric identity card scheme means, or the state of the rural employment guarantee scheme in Chhattisgarh. And hundreds of thousands of people are reading these stories. So it's clear that it was the way they were presented in legacy media, which was why they hadn't why readers hadn't responded. But I'm convinced that if a story is well told, people see the importance of it and they devour it.
No, so what I was saying was that when we were in the mainstream media, we were always told, given this reader feedback, and certainly I've sat through many sessions where you sit through a glass where the readers cannot see you, like an interrogation room, and you do these focus groups, and there are people on the other side reacting to what's appeared on the pages of the newspaper. And based on that, management would always get back and say that you need to do more of ABC, Bollywood, cricket, etc. And really, this doesn't matter. Much as you try, finally at the end of the day, they said, this is really not what people want to read about.
And it's also clear that these sort of what readers say in a survey is very different from what readers actually do. So in the old days, every time you did a reader survey, they would all say, we want more foreign news. And then nobody actually read the foreign news. And on the internet, this has sort of resulted in a phenomenon. We were talking to the people from The Guardian the other day. People share a lot of stories because it makes them look good, it makes them look intelligent. And so The Guardian has had a series of stories on public policy that have had many more forwards than have actually had clicks on the story. So everybody is sending this to their friends to say, hey, this is what I think you should be reading. I don't actually have to read it.
We find exactly that. Some of the stories that are of great public interest or national importance, you suddenly find that they go viral on social media, and you go back to the website and you find really very few people have read the story. But Dhimant, you haven't had that experience.
Yeah, so like I said, I'm a computer science engineer. We've been building technology products, so haven't had that experience. The only experience I have is the feedback that I get from analytics, like Google Analytics. We're 24 hours on that. And the second thing is we run sort of a feedback module asking people to, hey, did you love the story? If not, why? I mean, what more would you like to read? I've always found people being very candid about what they want to read. Probably because I don't have a comparison point of earlier. But the kind of stories that we publish and the kind of feedback we get has been fairly, there's a high correlation. If you go back with those kind of stories, we do see people really accepting those and then having a lot more shares and forwards and all of that. So yeah, I mean, it's been fairly direct for us since we, I mean, when you're giving feedback, also you're giving anonymously, right? So you don't have a peer pressure of trying to be, that you had to show yourself as being intelligent and you want to do. So I think that anonymity channel of collecting feedback has actually been pretty good for us.
I think as Naresh said, this is all very complex. What people say they read and what they actually read are two different things. In the other room, we were just talking now about the entire question. Someone asked the question about what about public television and what they show. Three-headed babies and UFOs, etc., which clearly have very high ratings. But clearly people know this and don't take all this extremely seriously. But in the age of social media, a lot of this gets passed around. So how do you reconcile the question of, as you said, ABC with the serious journalism that you do? How do you find a balance between both these?
So I think we do Bollywood and cricket, and we do, I've always thought that a publication is like a thali. It's got many different flavors to it, and a meal consists of many different notes and flavors. And that's what people come. You give your readers a range of things that they can dip into, and they'll move from the puri to from the carbohydrate to the protein, which is good for them. And they'll eat the salad, and eventually they'll exit on the sweet. But I think it needs to be all of these various things. Otherwise, it's a very unsatisfying experience. We, again, among the other models we started thinking about was do what I call now Kindle singles. So people produce these long analytical pieces of between 15,000 to 20,000 words. Tells you everything you need to know about a subject. The problem with that is that it doesn't necessarily build loyalty. So you may be interested in, and the first Kindle single I was delighted was about Teddy Weatherford, the jazz pianist from America who came to Calcutta in the 1940s. So the hell is interested in that? And since then they moved, but I was interested in the first one, not necessarily interested in anything on public health in the middle of Mississippi. So,
but it's very clear, I think, from all that both of you are saying, is that there is very clearly an appetite for stories that we thought people were not interested in. It's just a question of how you tell these stories. And the kind of media that you're running right now allow you the freedom of trying these new modes of storytelling.
And how to get them to pay for it.
Yeah, that is still up in the air. Are there any questions or comments at this stage? Because we don't have all that much time.
Question to the panel, or Naresh in particular. Does this absolute objective sense of how many times a story has been clicked, read, shared, and what kinds of stories trend, put a pressure on you to do more of those, even to the individual and to the body of the media itself?
No. I mean, so I could see how it would result in some publications doing what they do. But we made a decision that doesn't matter, and so we're going to do a lot of solid reporting. What it also means is that we know every day it's possible to tell what's going to trend. So we throw in a couple of clickbait, sort of, this is what they're saying on the internet, buzzy kind of stories. But it doesn't mean that we will do less of the other kind of serious journalism.
I'll just add to that. The way we've tried to structure our editorial team is that our editorial team gets measured in terms of the impact that they drove the week prior, not in terms of readership. The readership is a metric for the marketing guys. So that way, the editorial team is focused on doing a story. Hey, if I run this story, is this going to have an impact? And obviously over the years we figured out that these kind of stories do lead to people getting in touch and doing all of that. So I think even having some sort of a metric like that actually helps to make sure that you're doing the right kind of content.
I think financial independence allows you to this kind of freedom.
I want to also add that, until a few months ago, everybody was obsessed by trying to get people to forward your stories, which was thought to increase readership. And that necessarily meant that it would be a certain sort of buzzy story. But also, a very important source of traffic for websites is Google News or Yahoo News. And that entirely works on the keywords in your story. And so you could, some of our more serious stories get huge readerships again because they've been picked up by the Google News robot. The absolutely petrifying thing about all of this is that there's some algorithm that determines how much you are read. There's some robot that's picking onto some phrase in your story. There's no way to calculate this. But it doesn't depend on how you craft your story, and you don't have to be like a little puppy dog begging your reader to read you all the time.
I think algorithm is the most innovative thing about journalism and the most frightening things about Indian journalism. Yes.
Yeah. Hi. I'm curious about just a reflection hearing you talk about how journalism is sort of a paternalistic element, if you don't mind me saying so, to investigative journalism. Here's a good thing, a nice medicine, something a balm for society, and you should be interested in it. And all the various ways in which you've talked about using market mechanisms to kind of discover or to maximize people's ability to kind of absorb what's good for them. The focus groups are a classic example. So I'm just wondering if you think about from the demand side, what are some of the experiments you've undertaken to really understand what consumer really wants? So I'm thinking of public health models. For example, a lot of public health NGOs in India, rural India, they do health fairs as an easy way of connecting with people and really engaging at that kind of grassroots level. I'm just wondering on the demand side, beyond the example of the focus groups, are there any interesting experiments or models to really grapple with what meeting people where they are rather than delivering a medicine they should be consuming?
So, I think it has got to be a mix. The demand side should basically the feedback should give you and probably drive about 50% of what you're putting out. But I think the remaining 50% is also at your discretion, at your editorial discretion. Because, so for instance, what we do, right? We do look at broad categories which people love reading. And we do look at broad categories which lead to tangible change. But at the same time, if you don't push the envelope, if you don't go beyond these categories, you're not really reinventing yourself. To give you a classic example, 2 years ago we were doing absolutely no video stories. But when we started doing them, and obviously no user told me, hey, I want to watch more videos, right? But they said, yes, I want to know about rainwater. Yes, I want to know about women's education in rural India, and so on. But when we started doing more visuals, we started seeing that people are spending more time and more engagement happening with those videos, right? So I think it's very important that while 50% of weightage you do give to that kind of feedback and analysis that you do, I think you've also got to be experimenting with newer formats, newer forms of storytelling, newer content structures, and so on.
I think media is a strange thing in that a media publication creates its own demand. Until you've seen it, you don't actually know you want it. One of the great problems with playing to, and I hate the word consumer, I only use the word reader, and I detest the word product. And so my business folks are always sort of tiptoeing around me because I bite their heads off. They say these things. I think a publication sort of embodies a real relationship between the journalists who create this stuff and the readers. And if you were to play for the lowest common denominator, you would be giving up on your responsibility as a journalist. And that's why we have so many awful publications. They're playing for the lowest common denominator because they believe that that is what the readers want and that's what the readers have told them they want. And like I said, in the age of Google Analytics, you know that that is what readers are reading. You could be reduced to being a sort of tabloid. So you have to step in and it involves some sort of discretion on how you tell a story that actually interests people who think they're only interested in Hollywood or cricket.
Yes, I would like to ask a question on the dissemination of the stories that you do. because to a large extent I receive most of your links, all three of you, on social media. I receive it on Facebook, I receive it on Twitter and so on. So I really have no reason to visit scroll.in or India Spend. And I'm just wondering how you perceive this, because in a sense it's piggybacking your way to a larger readership.
Actually, that segues perfectly into our next segment. So if you wouldn't mind keeping your answer very brief, because we're running a tiny bit late.
I think as a publisher, it's great because you're discovering us where you are, and the way I look at it, I think 3 years, 4 years down the lane, websites or mobile apps would be redundant. We've got to take content where you reside, be it Twitter, be it Facebook, be it Snapchat, wherever you are, right? So I think it's great you're discovering us where you are. At least we're able to get there, and I think that's the way forward.
I mean, that is exactly why Scroll is designed the way it is. We don't have what is a conventional homepage like the New York Times. We're a series of articles, because most people are not coming to the homepage. They are discovering us on social media, and we are designed for you to discover us on social media.
Very quickly, this is a period of great transition, and we're all learning as we go along that many people, as I said, come to our website, many simply don't. And they say that if you don't send this to us, these email alerts or social media, the tweets or whatever, we won't see you at all. So I think we are still trying to figure out what works.
Okay, one last quick question, please.
You say your choice of stories is determined by the impact. How do you measure this impact, and how much time do you give yourself, to know what the impact is?
Yeah. So we have a very well-defined process where, at the start of the next week, we go back and talk to all the protagonists who we featured 7 days ago and ask them about what happened after the story went live. And they would give us an entire report on, the tangibles and the intangibles. So they got a lot of funding, or they got volunteers to queue up, or they just got mentioned by the BBC, and so on, right? So we collect this, and we have like a dossier. So we've got like almost about 300 case studies as of now of impact generated by these stories. So we do this, we've institutionalized this as a process.
How much time do you give yourself?
Oh, well, a whole day goes in this, pretty much, from a writer's perspective.
What the impact is it measured on a week or 2 weeks?
7 days. Exact 7 days, because we see that a story usually starts to trail off by the 6th day. So we say we just go and talk about it again. Thanks.
Thank you very much for an absolutely wonderful panel. Obviously the audience wants